Annalisa?
Yes.
I love the name, by the way.
Thank you.
I've never seen the name before.
Yeah, it's German, but my parents, I guess, well, not my parents, actually, the nuns in Catholic school anglicized the spelling.
Oh, okay. Dang it. Dang it. Well, it's kind of perfect. I just saw the story and I want to get your opinion on it. I don't know all the details. I'm kind of acting like a headline reader here, but there's something like there's a wastewater treatment plant in Deer Park that's going to house some of the, I guess some of the hazardous material from the train wreck in East Palestine.
Ooh.
Have you heard? Have you
I
seen?
wasn't aware of that.
No, really?
That's alarming.
Annalisa, am I on the front end more than you here?
Maybe so. Maybe so. We did have, I had a briefing this morning and it was about, I know the legislature, there's some legislation about the waste repositories, but I was assuming it was nuclear waste because that's been such a big issue.
Yeah.
Now I'll have to look into it.
Yeah. I don't know where I saw it at. I saw it at one of the, maybe it was like the Statesman or Austin American Statesman or something like that. Is there any concern, and before they were bringing, I mean, I don't know if that's true or not, but any concern with that material making its way to Texas?
Yeah, of course. We don't want Texas to become like some repository for all sorts of waste. I mean, and that's where there's people who have been fighting, the expansion of these nuclear waste facilities. It's not something that we want Texas to be known for, especially because Texas is growing so rapidly. And, we saw with what happened recently, when you're going through and transporting these wastes in populated areas, there's always the potential for a catastrophe. Texas also, we are not probably not the best in the nation at regulating hazardous materials and all. And I guess you remember what happened in West Texas, where a big fertilizer facility blew up several years ago. Yeah. So, and luckily it was in the evening. But it was right by a school. So the potential for hazard is, and for frankly catastrophes is only going to increase, as the state gets more densely populated. Yeah. Which is, the forecasts. But frankly, what we're dealing with a lot, I think our most immediate threat that needs to be addressed is something where it's not catastrophic, it's incremental. And we're talking about non-point source pollution in stormwater. That's probably about the biggest threat to our surface and groundwater supplies here in the state.
Yeah. So for folks that don't know, can you let everyone know where you work and who you're representing?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I'm the executive director of the Greater Edwards Aquifer Alliance. Our service area is 21 counties in Central Texas. And that's because our core mission is to protect the Edwards and Trinity aquifers. And they're amazing groundwater supplies, but they're incredibly vulnerable to pollution because they're karst groundwater supplies. So, infiltrating polluted stormwater goes directly into the aquifer. So the whole watersheds within those regions is what we deal with, the streams, the springs, and our region is the location of the largest springs in Texas, that are coming mostly from the Edwards Aquifer. So we're an alliance of 55 member organizations within those 21 counties.
Wow.
And yeah, so we advocate for clean water. And so that probably, I was thinking of people who are thinking of threats to water because there are so many threats right now, like with orphaned wells from fracking or this and that. And they're going, what? You talking about stormwater? But in our region, the prospect of diminishing water quality from stormwater is a serious one.
Oh, absolutely. And what prompted this conversation, Annalisa, is an article that I saw from the Texas Tribune highlighting an informal investigation being performed by the EPA on the TCEQ. And just a few months ago, I had the privilege to speak to, oh man, I forgot his name, Anthony D'Souza. He's with the Houston Air Alliance. And he was talking about the TCEQ and kind of how there's so much work to be done, and it's almost like they don't have the manpower to keep up with everything. Is that kind of what you're seeing too?
I would totally agree with that. And right now, actually, this is a really opportune time to have this conversation because the legislature reviews each state agency on a schedule, and we're a little bit behind because of COVID, but the TCEQ is up for sunset review this session of the legislature. So it's a great opportunity to try to get these reforms. And also, we submitted comments, and I think a lot of the environmental groups submitted comments saying the TCEQ's budget does need to be increased. They need to actually update all their information systems because, for example, if we want to look at a permit application, we have to go to a library and actually get the physical copy and make Xerox copies and bring it back. That's crazy in this day and age. And so we're asking for more money to be allocated to that agency to bring them into the 21st century and to hire enough people to actually do the job that they're charged with doing. We filed that petition because we didn't feel like our state agency, the TCEQ, was actually adequately enforcing the federal Clean Air and Clean Water Acts. But like I said, with this Sunset Commission, I think having these two things happen simultaneously, like having the EPA looking into our charges and having the opportunity to fix these deficiencies within TCEQ through the sunset process. It's kind of like a perfect storm for good, maybe.
Can you talk about what this Sunset Commission is? I'm not familiar with it.
So it is, I think there's 3 legislators on there. They have a big staff. What they do is they rotate the agency. So every 10 years, every state agency comes under sunset review, which means that they look at the agency, how they're performing, what duties are they doing, are they actually fulfilling their function? And then they have the opportunity to say, look, we don't need this agency anymore, so we're just going to sunset it. It's going to disappear. So it's I think it's a really responsible process, unfortunately. And so there are other agencies like the Texas Water Development Board was under sunset review this time too. So we participate it's the opportunity for all of us who rely on these agencies to protect us to be able to look and comment, in person. They have hearings and also submit written comments on how these agencies are performing and what recommendations we would make to have them perform better.
Has there ever been any informal investigations like this one before in the past?
Oh, you mean with the EPA?
Yeah, with the EPA leading an informal investigation on the TCEQ?
Not to my knowledge on TCEQ, but I might be wrong on that. I'd have to ask our lawyers. I know that they've had investigations of other agencies that, aren't living up to their regulations. Yeah. So there is precedent.
Okay. I'm, to be fully transparent, I'm a glass is half empty kind of guy. And I almost see this as just like a rubber stamp exercise from the outside looking in. Like just so they can appease voters or the public. They're going to say they're doing this investigation. Are you a little bit more confident than that? Are you hopeful for some change to actually come of this?
I am. It's up to us now. The Aquifer Alliance 11 years ago, we went through the same process with TCEQ. We worked with others and had public meetings across the state, just as we did this time, so that people who were dissatisfied with the performance of the TCEQ could come and voice their concerns. A lot of those were reflected in the staff report. So there's a sunset staff, and they publish a report and their recommendations of what needs to be addressed. This time, a lot of that stuff did make it into the staff report that was submitted to the legislators. But it's it's a little frustrating because there was a hearing held at the Capitol where the legislators who were on that sunset committee were hearing people's comments, and anybody had the chance to come and comment. There were, I think, 3 busloads of people from Houston and that Houston airline. I mean, people are very upset because they're suffering from bad air quality, and it was kind of disheartening because one of the legislators who was on that committee actually said, "I don't understand what y'all are talking about with environmental racism." And we're just like, what? I mean, so it's like maybe they have a long way to go in actually understanding these issues, but we do have this opportunity. And so I know we work, GIA works with the Alliance for a Clean Texas, and we were talking today about having a lobby day, so we would invite citizens to go around and visit their legislators, because these issues will be coming up and the legislators will have a chance to vote on it.
How much support from the local politicians or from state politicians are you getting? Is it pretty nonpartisan, or do you get, and I don't know how much you can talk about this, but do you get support from both sides of the aisle, or is it kind of one-sided right now?
Well, we, with our membership in the Aquifer Alliance, because the region we serve, we're very much on both sides of the aisle. We have, I would say probably we have more members who are Republican, just because that reflects the demographics of our region. So we, as far as the legislators go, it's a little frustrating, and I'm just going to be very frank here. We know that Texans, like the vast majority of Texans, want to see their natural resources protected, air, clean air, clean water, plenty of parklands, all that type. But frankly, a lot of times they're voting for people who don't like regulation. Yeah. And Texas brags on that. I mean, that's the Texas miracle. We don't have a lot of rules. And so there's definitely a disconnect, I think, when it comes to what the individual person wants versus, how those desires are reflected in their in the actions of their elected officials.
Yeah. I don't know if it's because I'm just looking into environmental issues more lately, but it seems like my news, for me personally, is being curated, and I'm seeing everything as it relates to PFAS in our water, toxic chemicals. I mean, just, it seems like a lot more people are talking about it these days. So that's kind of what has me hopeful is you see a lot of podcasters talking about it. You see random social media influencers talking about this kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So I think it's being talked about it more, and maybe that's going to kind of drive the change we need. Maybe. I don't know.
I agree. And, it is a lot in the news, and I think climate change has, of course, elevated everything and given it more immediacy. But what I've seen, because the Greater Edwards Aquifer Alliance, we've been around since 2004. So I've seen, because I regularly during the legislative session, I will say like, oh, this bill is going to be voted on and we really need your support. Can you contact your legislators? Or this bill is just awful, contact them and tell them vote no. People really respond. And so I'm seeing if people are like provided with a means of making their voice heard, they are responding. And we know from the legislative staffers we talk to that when they do respond, it's noted. I mean, so they say like, one letter to your legislator is worth like, 1,000 votes or something.
Right.
I mean, so I think, we really just need everybody to kind of pitch in. This legislative session, it only happens every 2 years, and it only goes on from January to mid-May. So it's not like you have to be on top of it forever or whatever, but during this little period of time, if you're interested in these environmental issues, yes, you do have the opportunity to make a difference. You can sign up for legislative alerts on the Greater Edwards Aquifer Alliance website. You can also sign up. We just deal mainly with water issues, but there's the Alliance for Clean Texas, and you can go to their website and sign up for legislative alerts that have to do with air quality, energy, clean energy, and there's a lot of legislation going on those topics this session. So, it's kind of like you said, curated. I mean, to sift through and say, okay, this is where your voice can really make a difference,
Definitely. In regards to what some of this investigation by the EPA is leading, what's kind of the top 5 or the biggest things that you're hoping to come from it? What's in regards to Texans water? What are the biggest fears, I guess?
For one, and the TCEQ is charged, and this is true of both air and water, of assessing the cumulative impact. So, okay, somebody applies for a permit, the kind that we deal with a lot. They want to build a sewage treatment plant. They want to discharge that wastewater, it's treated wastewater, into a nearby stream or river. So when they send that, when the applicant puts in for a permit to build that plant and discharge that wastewater, which is actually is supposed to comply with the Clean Water Act, then they should be looking at how many other wastewater plants are there already in that area that are going into that same waterway. The same way with air, we see like around the hill country, because those are limestone aquifers, areas where there's just so much activity of cement and aggregate, which is putting so much particulate matter into the air. But when they consider those permits at TCEQ, they don't look at the cumulative impacts of all those operations that are within that area. They just look at that one plant by itself. So one of the main things that we would like to see, and I think everybody would like to see, is that they make some effort to assess what are the cumulative impacts on a given community from all these operations, not just this one.
I read something too, that some of the onus of getting some of this data of what the environmental impact on like a community, it has to be provided by the community and not really by the organization or the company. Is that accurate?
Yeah, it's very frustrating because it was not last legislative session, but I think maybe the one before it, but they changed, they have a process. We can contest a permit. So we can go in and say, we don't think that you should issue this permit. because we don't think that it's safe for the environment.
Hmm.
The way they really put a lot of changes into that process, so it leaves the burden of proof of us who are contesting the permit to provide all the information, which is hiring expert witnesses and providing all that, rather than saying to the applicant, like, you need to prove to us that this is safe. And that's one of the things that we'd like to see change.
Yeah, that seems so half back-ass backwards to me. It doesn't make make any
and
sense.
One of the things that we'd like to see change too is that the way the process works is, say we don't like a permit, we typically will ask for a public meeting so that the permit can be discussed. Those public meetings occur after the TCEQ staff has already approved the permit, which doesn't make sense. We would like to see the public meeting happen before the permit was approved so that maybe TCEQ staff could say, hey, these are genuine concerns, and work with the applicant to address those concerns.
I don't know if you know this off the top of your head, but of the permits that have been contested, I don't know, in the last couple of years, what's the percentage of them that get rejected versus the percentage that get approved?
I don't have figures on that. I can tell you from our own experience, we have contested probably about 50 or 60 permit applications. The most common outcome is that we negotiate a settlement with the applicant. So we actually meet with the applicant. We say, this is what we want out of this. You have to agree to this in writing. And so we get our concerns addressed that way. So TCEQ is not really, involved in that. We've had some cases, very disappointingly, that the judge it's the State Office of Administrative Hearings, the judge will say that the permit should be denied, but then that denial has to be approved by the TCEQ commissioners. Now, there's only 3 commissioners, and they're appointed by the governor. So we've had, I guess, about 4 or 5 instances where the administrative law judge recommended to deny the permit, but the TCEQ commissioners went ahead and overruled that and approved the permits anyway, which is very disappointing. We have one group that's appealing right now that permit approval by the TCEQ. So we had one very important case, and there was 1 seat vacant on the commission. So it was just 2 people who actually approved a permit that had gone through this whole process and was impacting literally hundreds and hundreds of people in the area, So yeah, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. People have floated the ideas of actually having those TCEQ commissioners elected rather than appointed, maybe as a method of making them more responsive. But we do think, like I said, through this sunset process, and through bringing it to the attention of the EPA, we do have an opportunity to make this process more fair to Texans and more protective of the rights of Texans to have clean air and water.
Yeah. And, I know you're more focused on water. How concerned are you with plastic pellets or plastic nurdles?
Well, in water? That's pretty awful. The evidence that's coming out is that they're everywhere. Yeah. So, including in wastewater. So, yeah, that's a shared concern, and we're really glad that the EPA they seem to be taking some concrete steps to addressing that. I've been getting a lot of here's a opportunity to comment on these rule changes and things like that. So it seems like the federal government is actually paying attention to that. And then another area of concern that we have, and it's similar to the PFAS, is that emerging contaminants or anthropogenic contaminants, or some kind, they're called personal care products. So, because typically those are not removed by most wastewater treatments. And so those are going into the environments as well. And so we're seeing things like, endocrine disruptors, changing the sex of fish and, the benthic populations and all. And so, we're seeing like, it only makes sense that the more people you have and people with all our modern conveniences and ways of living and all, the greater impact you're going to have on the environment. So we're glad to see that those things are being addressed.
Yeah, you mentioned changing or the chemicals impacting fish. I talked to this one researcher out of Florida, and he was studying fish and talking about how the wastewater treatment plants can't stop medication, like the chemicals from medication, and they were finding absurd amounts, like the levels were insane, of these fish that had anxiety or depression medications, like twice the level of what would be the recommended dose for a human in these fish. So I imagine we're seeing something similar like that in Texas too.
Oh yeah. So and unfortunately, like we looked at testing that had been done at the Edwards Aquifer Springs. So this is water that's coming from the aquifer. It's not running over land. It's coming from underground. It's always been this really, really high quality water supply, and it still is. But what we're seeing is, blood pressure medication, aspirin, nicotine, you name it, anything that people take and is not metabolized by their body and goes into the wastewater stream is showing up in these streams, in these springs. And so we say, we are having an impact. Now, it's not a real severe impact, but it's a cause of concern because we know that wastewater is diminishing the quality of those groundwater supplies.
Yeah. With all the people moving into Central Texas, is there a concern with these aquifers to run dry? Is that even possible?
It's the Edwards Aquifer. We all participated in a lengthy process. It was like 4 years to set quantities of water that could be withdrawn from the Edwards. They have to be limited so the springs still keep flowing. So with the Edwards Aquifer, it's not as much a concern. With the Trinity Aquifer, it is a huge concern because that aquifer doesn't recharge as quickly as the Edwards, and people are withdrawing amounts that are unsustainable.
Yeah.
So you have the prospect of those groundwater supplies in the Trinity Aquifer being depleted. And there are groundwater districts that try to deal with that, but it's kind of a moving target. It's really hard to assess how much is actually being withdrawn because you have individual well owners. And so, of course, the more straws that you put in there, the more is being pumped out, and it's hard for them to get a handle on it.
Yeah, my brother lives in Dripping Springs, and last year, where he lives at, he went dry for a period of time. And there's just so many people moving out there. And like you said, just dipping their straw in there. And, everyone has a garden now. COVID made people do more gardens. So there's a lot of wasted water doing that. So, yeah, it seems like that the future is not real clear when it comes to that, like living in Central Texas.
It's a huge concern. I mean, the growth has been the main challenge that we deal with in our organization, frankly, is trying to mitigate the impacts of this huge amount of growth. And seriously, Comal County and Kendall County, which are both contiguous to Bexar County, San Antonio, I think the first and second fastest growing in the nation.
Wow.
I mean, this is like, so we're busier than we ever have been, and we've always been busy, but yeah. So, it's a little frustrating because we feel like we wouldn't have to be, if Texas would enforce adequate regulations, then there's a problem too. And this is a huge problem that I'd like to bring up, is that Texas does not allow counties to regulate land use. So a county cannot say like, you have to have large lots, or you have to set aside this much land for a park, things like that. And so the growth that's going on in the unincorporated areas is just pretty much a free-for-all. You can't even say like, oh, you can't build this industrial plant next to a school. I mean, you can't even say incompatible land uses. And so we feel like we would really, really like to see these counties empowered to direct their own destiny and to govern growth in a way that's civilized, at least civilized, and protective of our natural resources.
Yeah, it's like a double-edged sword, because I know, local cities, they want the growth and they want to bring, prosperity to their cities, but what's the cost of it? Dripping Springs was where I grew up in, and there used to be like a defining line between Dripping Springs and Austin. When you said you were going to Austin, it meant like you had to leave Dripping for like there was land between it, and now you drive through it and it's just insane, the amount of houses.
Oh yeah,
it looks like California with the rolling hills, and you have all those houses, and now Dripping Springs floods. You get a little bit of rain, you know what I mean? It's changing the landscape.
I'm really glad you brought that up, because that is one of the problems that we're working on there. The state right now has regional flood planning groups, and it's smart. They did it by watershed. So they've convened, and like I serve on one of those for the Guadalupe watershed, but trying to get a handle on the flooding. And the fact of the matter is, especially in these karst areas, when you pave over those karst areas, the water cannot go underground and replenish the groundwater, and so it ends up running off and flooding. And unfortunately, what we're seeing is, at least within the watersheds in Gia's service area, is that, these watersheds go from the hill country to the coast. And you see that income levels of the citizens of these areas tend to decline as they get further to the coast. So you have the wealthier areas up here in the hill country, and then the cities, and then as you go down towards the coast, you get lower income areas. Well, those poor low income folks are getting the worst impacts from the flooding, because the flooding starts at the top of the watershed and then it just picks up speed all the way down. And so really like to see the state. I think they're making a good start at trying to address this. And I love the fact that they did it by watersheds so that these could be addressed in a comprehensive manner. What needs to happen now is to make sure that the legislature appropriates enough money so that projects and all the different best management practices can be employed, so that we actually, what we advocate is green infrastructure that slows that water down and makes it soak into the ground and replenish our aquifers. That makes sense, and it's a lot more cost effective too than like building dams all over the place.
Yeah. Is there any other state that's experiencing growth like Texas is? Like, can we learn from other states from generations before?
Well, yeah, I'm trying to think right offhand, because I know that we're not the only one, and I think there's a lot of I'm more familiar with Texas, and what we're doing here. Now, I would say for a lot of our issues, and this wasn't really based on growth, it was based on, concern for protecting a water body. But I think some of the most progressive implementation of green infrastructure has been done in the Chesapeake Bay area. Mm. And that was because that bay was so polluted that they needed to really get to work and try to, clean that up.
I think the hot ticket, Annalisa, is moving to Tennessee.
Tennessee, huh?
Yeah. It seems like, everyone, I think that's going to be like the next Texas. I know a lot of, I don't know, just personally friends and family that have left Texas to move to Tennessee because it's kind of like the next Texas for Texans.
Interesting. And I think about it like, because I personally, my experience bears out that a lot of Californians are moving to Texas. Yeah. And a lot of the Californians I've met who have moved here lived in that area that, was impacted by the wildfires. And and so with climate change, I think we're going to have to seriously look at large migrations of people from a place that's unsafe to a place that's safe. And if you look at Texas, we're probably, we're not really prone to earthquakes. We're, we've got a lot going for us. So it could be, a major economic boost to Texas. And it certainly is already a population boost to Texas. So it becomes incumbent on us to do everything that we can to try to absorb this population growth while still maintaining the quality of life that we have.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough.
And that's going to take regulation.
Yeah, I don't know how you balance. There's so much nuance. You brought up environmental racism, and I'm starting to see that more and more. And the people that were once living in Austin, like a lot of people, unless they just purely have no way to go, but if people have a choice, they left Austin, and the people that live in Austin aren't originally from Austin. They've gone out to other, out towards more West Texas, South Texas, or they just left the state. So it's like, I don't know what, it's not, I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but it's getting more expensive, and it seems like the quality of life is also reducing as it gets more expensive.
Yeah, and I think a factor is basically Texans are smart, but I think the state government has limited local control, and they're actually a trend to even limit it more. And so if you have like Texans, if they elect their county commissioners, these are smart people, but the state is really selfish with the power. They do not want to give them the authority that they need to govern their own areas. And a lot of it is because you have these large industries like the building industry. There's all sorts of industries. They say, well, we don't want to go and have different regulations for each county. We just want one template that's statewide, and that's all we have to deal with. And I think that's frankly really depriving Texans of the ability to intelligently govern their own communities. Yeah. And like I said, we have smart people here. They know what they want to do. They're just not allowed to. Yeah.
Does your organization work or collaborate with other organizations outside of Texas? I know we're only focused on Texas water, but do y'all collaborate with other organizations outside of the state?
Yeah. I'm on one committee that is convened by the EPA. We meet twice a year, and that's actually to address non-point source pollution. And we had also worked with the EPA through their urban waters projects in the past. So, and we do comment, but we actually concentrate more of our efforts on state and local. Yeah,
with good reason. It's a lot to take care of. What are some of the I guess the heavy hitters this legislative session that the public would benefit them to support?
And this is not water issues, but we still haven't fixed the grid. And
you know what's funny?
And I don't know about you, but my electricity bill has doubled.
Yeah.
So I would say everybody needs to follow that. I mean, that's going to be the one that has the most impact on your health and safety and pocketbook, coming the session. One of the things that we're really concerned about is this whole issue of what they call produced water, which is water that comes from the fracking process. They're talking about reusing that as a water supply source. That's something that people really want to look at carefully, to make sure that it's regulated in a way that is safe. Let's see, I think just because everybody in the world should be trying to address climate change. I've seen bills that have been filed that seem to be intentionally targeted at reducing implementation of solar, wind, and like that. And so people really need to maybe keep an eye on what the state can do. There's some good bills too. There's some bills that say Texas needs to get on board and effectively address climate change. And it's not like you have to know every bill number or anything like that. You can call your legislator's office and say, look, I'm really concerned about climate change, and I want you to do everything that you can to support it. Because you have your special interest groups, and they're very active in Texas and not always to the benefit of Texans.
Absolutely. In regards to the power grid, is there anyone knowledgeable or credible on the topic that would like to do a podcast? I've reached out to a number of people, and a lot of people don't want to talk about it. The experts,
I don't know. I think the ones that I've seen are is Public Citizen and Sierra Club.
Oh, okay. No, I haven't reached out to them.
Yeah, that's who I'm getting my information from about it. And like I said, this is just me as a citizen because my organization doesn't really deal with the power grid. But they're doing a lot. So off air I can email you some folks. But yeah, I think Public Citizen and Sierra Club have both been very active and really, really smart about doing the research on how this is going to impact Texans.
And I think that's another topic or another area where the growth of Texas is impacted. Like our power can't keep up with all the people moving in,
Well, and there's like, that's a whole ball of wax.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not a power expert or anything, but it seems like there's some correlation there. When I was a kid, I don't remember losing power as much.
That's right.
Well, Annalisa, this has been great. I really appreciate your time. I know you're very busy, and I think these are important conversations to have. How can people follow y'all on social media? How can they get involved?
Yeah, we have a Greater Edwards Aquifer Alliance Facebook page. We have two, actually. One's just called Greater Edwards Aquifer, and one's called Greater Edwards Aquifer Alliance, so they can go on those. And then we have... you can go to our webpage, which was aquiferalliance.org, and you can sign up for news bulletins. And so we send out news bulletins, about issues. You can become an individual member to support our organization, and that's also on the website on how to do that. And if you are part of a group that's within our 21 counties, which you would see on our website, you're welcome to join the Alliance as a member group.
Okay.
So that we work to support the agendas of our member groups, especially where it comes to water issues.
Okay, yeah, I'll look that up on the website, and then I'll also paste that in the podcast notes. That way, people can have a quick reference to that, because that's pretty cool. Awesome. Well, Annalisa, I know you're busy. I'll get out of your hair. I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Enjoyed it.
Have a good one. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye.